Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Armitage, and this is an invitation to join us for a trip down memory lane. We're going to be talking a lot about 1964. What was so special about 1964? Well, in that year, Lester B. Pearson was Prime Minister of Canada. Lyndon Johnson was President of the United States. Ford just unveiled a brand new car. They called it a Mustang. It would catch on. Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, won his first heavyweight title when he knocked out Sonny Liston in Lewiston, Maine. Making its television debut was the quiz show Jeopardy! The Canadian flag, the maple leaf, was unveiled for the first time in 1964. And in that same year, St. Mary's won their very first Atlantic Bowl. They beat McMaster 15-1. No surprise that the Huskies were going to be good in 1964. Head coach Bob Hayes and his coaching staff of Les Goodwin and Jim Bear had a really good feeling about the team. Hayes would say it was going to be the best balance offensively and defensively that he had ever had. In 1963, the Huskies lost their first two games by a single point. Then they won 6 in a row. Well, other teams have won 6 in a row, but this team, the Huskies of 63, won 6 in a row without giving up a single point, a feat that had never been accomplished before or since that time. So Hayes had a good feeling going into 64, but it didn't start out that way. The Huskies lost early to St. X, 20-6 at Wanderers Ground. But a few weeks later, in Antigonish, they beat X 9-8. And that stopped St. X's winning streak at 47 games. Had they won that game that afternoon, they would have won 48 in a row, and that would have set a new record. Bud Wilkinson and the Oklahoma Sooners had won 47 in a row back in 1957. So 1964, the Huskies and St. X finished with identical 6-1 records. But the Atlantic Bowl Committee decided that St. Mary's would go to the Atlantic Bowl game against the University of McMaster Marauders. They were ranked 8th in the country. The Huskies were number 3. So on a November afternoon, on a cold day, on a muddy field at Wanderers Grounds, it was St. Mary's against McMaster, and the Huskies won it 15-1. Let's meet some of the members of that 1964 Atlantic Bowl championship team, the first ever from St. Mary's to win the Atlantic Bowl. Two members of that 64 team can be called doctor. One of them was an outstanding middle linebacker, all-Canadian status. He was that good. He set up the Quantum Performance Institute in Phoenix, and he joins us now, Bob Rutolo. Bob, you were the leader on defense in 64. What made that defense so good?
Steve, it's great to recall. I remember earlier today when someone was asked the question about what happened at that time. Her response, this was this morning, was, I can't remember. And I think that's true in this sense. When you're in the flow, when you're in peak performance, your mind is just processing what's going on rather than thinking. And that's the way that game was. For me, it was the last game of the season. It was the last game of playing 4 years at St. Mary's. It was the culmination of 4 years of working with this team. They were awesome. The relationships we built on and off the field were awesome. It was interesting. I was thinking about this last night, and I said to myself, well, what made it the way it was? And I said, Bob, I have to remember when you started, you came here at 17 years old. You didn't even know they had a football team, although you played football in preparation. You were coming here to play hockey, and then you found out that Bob Hayes was the coach, and Father Rushman at the time, the Dean of Man, introduced me to Bob Hayes and the team, and this little 17-year-old kid looked at that team and says, I can do this. And I was very fortunate to be able to make the team. And so this is 4 years of progress of working together. And I matured as a young man. I didn't even know it, but at that time, I didn't realize, I started thinking about what football is like. And football really, for me, is a metaphor for life. My first year was my first quarter at playing football, and I was learning how to play in the sense of in the team and that sort of thing. Playing with people a lot older than me. We played the Navy teams at that time and everything. My second year, I was kind of feeling better. My third year, I was and my fourth year was, wow, this is it. And we matured as a team that way. I was very fortunate at that time to mature as a team. And so when it came to the last game of the season, we were ready. And things just went really well, really well.
At your Performance Institute, you teach people how to perform better, obviously, and to achieve their potential. What did Hayes teach you that allowed you to achieve your potential in your 4 years as a Husky?
He was an awesome coach, and he was a great moral model. I mean, here's a coach who was young enough he was only a few years older than we were. And I remember when a player wasn't playing well, let's say wasn't blocking well or tackling well, he would put a helmet on his head with no pads to get right in front of him. I mean, he showed you how to play. Okay, not only verbally, but demonstrated. So I learned from the experience with Bob and his coaches all about leadership. I learned more on the field in playing football than I did in a classroom. I'm an experiential learner, and you learn by experience on the field. But I can connect all of what my experience in leadership development, my experience in helping people to be successful in their lives, and helping them to be successful in their careers. I can attribute, I'd say 80% of the foundation was on the football field and what I learned through St. Mary's. Not only on the field, but off the field, because the sense of community. I mean, even today, when we come back, I mean, my goodness, it's been a long time. We still have these relationships, strong ties.
Why do you think that is? We celebrated the 25th anniversary of that 64 win. We celebrated the 50th, and now we're here celebrating number 60. Why?
I think we've learned a formula for success in life. And it's all about relationships. It's all about being the best version of yourself. It's all about, well, right now where we are, it's legacy. I mean, for me now, it is what can I pass on to my family, to my friends, to those people I work with. It's all about legacy. So when I hear where St. Mary's is, where it's been, and I know many of us have remorse about the old St. Mary's. I walk down Halifax and it's a different city. It's but it's the same. It is really truly about life, is that we have a heritage here that we have to honor. And I'm so glad that even our heritage now is expanded beyond the heritage that I knew here. So we're learning, we're learning how to embrace our history, embrace those all around us who weren't acknowledged before. And we're learning to be able to accept and to evolve. And that's what it's all about here. It's not only about legacy, it's about adapting, being agile. I mean, being able to respond to the situation in a very positive way. It's like looking at what are we becoming? Who are we? And letting the regrets go. Learn from the past, Be in the present, and as you're being in the present, do it in a way that you're preparing for the future. No harm. No harm. It's how do I add value? I mean, to come back here and to now I'm blessed. I've got my daughter graduated from St. Mary's. I've got 4 grandchildren. I have one getting ready for university. Whether he chooses St. Mary's, that isn't important. To have him here and to see the foundation and see what this institution has created, we are co-creators of our present and our future. We do it here.
Bobby Rue, I couldn't have said it better at Quantum Performance Institute.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for doing what you're doing. This is awesome. This is great.
The next player you're about to meet was a star at high school in Halifax, QEH, an outstanding running back and a terrific linebacker. And I can say that from personal experience because I played at Prince Andrew. We played against him in the high school final one year, and he was so solid as a running back and a great linebacker. He would do that when he came to St. Mary's. After St. Mary's, he dabbled in a lot of things: construction, import, export, you name it, he did it. And he finished as the manager of the marina at a very famous island in Nova Scotia, Oak Island. Darrell Burgess, take me back to 1964 and what you remember about that team that year.
Well, the team was a great bunch of guys. We had a lot of camaraderie. Everybody knew everybody quite well. We got along great. I hadn't really planned to come to St. Mary's, and I met one of the players, the senior players, by the name of Stu O'Brien. And during the summer, we used to come to St. Mary's and go out on the field, which was, hey, a big thrill for me, and throw the football around and, talk about football. Met Bob Hayes and sort of got along with everybody. And Stu and I used to go over to Goresbrook School. They had hills over there. It had been a golf course. And we'd run up and down hills and try to get in some kind of shape, which after a summer, you're not in the best of condition. And Stu kept talking to me, why don't you come to St. Mary's, play football? A bunch of guys. And I'd met a few of them here, locals that had, joined us the odd couple of nights a week. We'd go to the field and just have a good time, have a lot of fun, And the more I thought of it, and I wasn't sure if I was really interested in coming to university. We hung around after high school, probably a dozen guys. And one other guy went to university. Everybody else started working in the workforce. So I gave it a lot of thought, and I said, well, hey, maybe I'll give it a try. So, of course, as you know, came Labor Day weekend or just before, and we started these 5 practices or 4 practices a day. I can't even remember. That's all we seemed to be doing was practicing, right? And sweating and get our bell rung and whatever else went on. So, and I met Bob Hayes. I met the coaches, Jim Baer, great guy, Les Goodwin, another fellow, and there were several others that joined, in the years I was here. Other than that, started out and things just carried right on. So
There were two.
I even met you, and you.
Yeah, you did that. You
that
did
guy.
indeed. There were 2 big games that year. One in Antigonish when we beat Santa Vex, and the other the Atlantic Bowl game. Your reflections, your thoughts on those 2 games from that 64 season.
Well, the Antigonish, Santa Vex, I don't think had been beaten in 5 years, I believe. I mean, and they were part of the AFC, which were 9 teams at the time, and they were dominant with everybody. Nobody could beat them. Nobody could go near them. And we went to X that year, and my God, we pulled a win out of the bag somehow. And it was a tough game, and knock them down, and everybody did their job correctly. And what an experience! And after it was over, we got together, and we had to, of course, bring a bus home to Halifax. And then they sent the police out to give us an escort to St. Mary's. And all the students were here at the university, to welcome us there, which, was quite a thrill, excellent thrill.
The Atlantic Bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Your memories.
I remember the mud. Very wet day. We had snow. We were practicing here at St. Mary's. It was so cold, we had to put plastic bags over our socks, our feet, before we put our cleats on, because you couldn't, your feet would go numb. Like it was about 6 inches of snow. Then the field, of course, because of that, it was wet, it was sloppy and that type of thing. But hey, again, a tough game, We played, McMaster University. And, they, I think in their mind, figured they were just going to wipe the field up with us. But everybody prevailed again, just like in the X game. Everybody did their job, plus, and it just turned out to the better. Another great thrill. So.
This team got together 25 years after the Atlantic Bowl, 50 years, and now 60 years. What is it about this group of players that keeps coming back to celebrate the year 64?
I think a lot of it's the camaraderie. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody, first name basis. There was, they were all just like a big family. They just got together, and it's nice to be able to carry on over the years and see them, every 10 years, and unfortunately, it's getting fewer all the time. People are passing on and or getting ill. They just can't come anymore, and heavens knows how much longer they be able to see each other. So.
What did Bob Hayes teach you about life?
Perseverance. Never give up was the main thing. And he did a hell of a job. And again, he had a great staff with him too. They were all interested in the players. They seemed to be interested on a personal level, that was the main thing. And the camaraderie that built up over time, So.
Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you, Steve.
A lot of players from that 64 championship team have given back to the university, but none more than the player you're about to meet. He was an assistant coach when the Huskies won the national title. He was the offensive coordinator in 1973. He was the athletic director for the Huskies, not once, but twice. And did I fail to mention that he's also an oral surgeon and was chief medical officer at the Dartmouth Hospital? Meet Dave Murphy, the starting quarterback for the team in 1964.
Wow. Thank you, Steve. Quite an introduction.
Why was that 64 team, A, as good as it was, and obviously as special as it was? What combination of factors made it a championship team?
Well, I think, first of all, you look at generational teams, and this was a generational team. When you went almost player to player, we were bigger than most. You take our backfield. I mean, you had Darryl was 225, Paul was 215, Teddy Purnell, who was probably the fastest guy in the league, he still was going up 195. I was the quarterback, 6'2", 205. And we went right along the line. Stu O'Brien was bigger, Red was bigger. Of course, Frank Archambault, who was all Canadian at both offense and defensive tackle, which is just absolutely amazing. But when it comes down to the very thing, what makes us different was Coach Hayes. He had a way of bringing us, and it was almost like close to a prison revolt. He would treat everybody equally, bad, make us do things that we really didn't think we could do because you would outdo your physical abilities to do them. And his favorite thing was, he says, you know what? A horse is more noble than you guys. A horse will run until it dies. You guys will pass out before it happens. And that was kind of the attitude that he had. And it was not pitted us against him, but it was us trying to get to the level that he wanted us to be. And we all bought in, and we all suffered the same except for Puma. He was, he kind of ducked out of stuff and got away with it.
This team as a group got together 25 years after winning the championship, 50 years, and now 60 years. Why? What's so special about this group of guys that they keep meeting every 60 years?
Because of that bond that you have. I think that most teams will go and you'll find that there is a bond because of the suffering and because of the highs and the lows that you go through in the course of a season. I once gave a speech in out west, and there were a number of Olympians there. And I said, would the former Olympians stand up? Well, right as soon as breakfast was over, I came up, and there's no such thing as a former Olympian. If you're an Olympian, you're Olympian life. Well, I've always adopted, there's no such thing as a former teammate. You're a teammate for life.
That's very special. There's no question about that. But there had to be something about that year that sticks in your mind. There are two games that I remember. Antigonish against St. Bex. They were going into that game having won 47 games in a row. The Huskies beat them 9-8. Does that game stick in your mind?
Oh, for sure it does. Yeah, I mean, even Al Keith kicking the single to give us the win. It was, 47 games in a row. I don't care who you are. That does play on your mind. Like, wow, we're up against a really, really good team that have been very, very successful for a very long time. How do we overcome that? And I think it was through grit, through having that generational team, and just the love for one another. That everybody, we were way before Bill Belichick said everybody do his job, because we knew that everybody does his job, and you trusted that the guy next to you was going to do his job too. And we just brought that up and went out and played hard and won.
I mentioned the fact that you were an oral surgeon. Why did you go into that field after your getting your degree at St. Mary's? Why become an oral surgeon?
Well, it's really funny because I'm trying to look back at my life and everything. And I wanted to be a doctor since I was 9 years old. And I was brought up in the project. So we didn't have doctors other than public service doctors that would come in. And I always wanted, and I tried to analyze myself, and I can't figure out why, but I did. And so I was going along, and I was going to be a general surgeon. And then the person who lived across the street from my parents was an oral surgeon. And, I sat with him. I went up. In fact, I saw my first major surgery with him before I ever saw a filling or anything. I never did in the dentistry. But that he explained to me, he says, like, there's two ways of going. I mean, yeah, you can be a general surgeon. Yeah, I know you can do it. But your quality of life. I said, we don't have as much of an on-call that a general surgeon would have. There are different priorities and different surgeries that you can do, and you can actually have a better lifestyle for yourself. I don't think life would have been any worse if I was a general surgeon, but anyway, that's how I was sort of influenced by him.
There have been some great quarterbacks at St. Mary's that have put on the maroon and white and competed for the Huskies. Billy Robinson was probably the best passer of the football. Chris Flynn, obviously the best runner. But I don't think, as we look back at all those quarterbacks, there has been a smarter quarterback than Dave Murphy. You've heard that comment before, obviously. How does that sit with you?
Well, I'm fine. I think that probably was smarter too. I would put leadership in there too. It was a different era. So as a quarterback, as you know, they came up that we called our own plays. There was nothing coming in from the sidelines. So the studying that you did, the preparation that you did for that game was going to indicate on the score how the team did. And I took it very seriously. And yeah, that's the one thing that Hayes said about me that was half good. Yeah.
Dave, thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Steve. That was great.
A couple of players from the 64 championship team turned professional after their years at St. Mary's. Our next player spent a number of years with the Montreal Alouettes. He was, without question, one of the hardest hitting players on the defensive side of the ball. He was so good, and he alone was allowed to play any position he wanted to on the defense. That was an honor granted very, very few by head coach Bob Hayes. Don Murphy, why would Bob Hayes allow you to do that, do you think? I know you were good, but did you think you were that good that you could play any place you wanted to on the defensive side of the ball?
The only thing was that, and Bob knew about this, that in high school, I was allowed to be a rover by Jack Poole, my high school coach. So that's where I got in the first experience of doing that kind of thing. So with Hayes, it was much easier because you watched game films and you watched, you took a look at the results from previous games so that you could tell the tendencies and build on that.
Why do you think that 64 team was so special and was able to beat X in Antigonish and then win the Atlantic Bowl by defeating McMaster?
Well, one of the big things was the camaraderie we had on the team, in the team, and that's shown by the number of people that we've got this weekend. And that has a positive effect on the ability of the team to go forward. I was able to do some coaching later, and it's very important to have kids that are enjoying. It's a game, and for the kids to enjoy the game and get some coaching with it as well, it improves the caliber of the ability of the kids in the sport.
You sent a number of players that you coached at the junior level to St. Mary's. You didn't hesitate to do that. Why?
Well, I had such a good feeling about the school myself and the friends that I have had, lifelong friends now, that I felt that they, it would be nice for them to get the same kind of experience and play good caliber football with good coaching.
What do you remember about that day that we won the Atlantic Bowl?
The biggest thing I remember was at the end of the game, the people rushing on the field. And the happiness that I had never had that experience.
In all the years that you had played rugby, you had never experienced that?
Rugby, I had a few times when I did experience that kind of thing. I played for the Windsor Rugby Club, and again, lifelong friends. But in one game, I was able to score a try in the third period of overtime, and that was pretty special. And it was to win the tournament, which was the Rose City tournament in 1965 or 6 or something like that.
Obviously, besides football, your first love was rugger. You started as a youngster. You finally hung up the boots at age 71. What enabled you to play for that length of time?
Probably that we had 4 doctors on the team. Those guys stitched me up on park benches, picnic tables, the trunks of cars. So I had a lot of good help along the way, but it was fun. I mean, rugby was probably the most enjoyable time of my life in sports. And I still have many, many good friends from that team today.
You played football at a very high level. You were very successful. You played rugby all over the world. What role did Bob Hayes play in your life as an athlete that made you as good as you were?
Well, one of the big things about Bob, and I remember him coming to, I had a summer job at the Chrysler truck plant in Windsor. And Chuck Liebrock showed up at the gate when I was getting off work one day. And I knew Chuck, I played high school ball against him. And he had come to St. Mary's for a year. And behind him was this other guy with a big chest and shoulders. And it was Bob Hayes. So I took Bob and back to I was raised by an aunt and uncle. And took him back to our house, and my uncle played pretty high level of football and hockey back in the 1920s. So he met Bob, we sat down, and Bob showed a film of the school and the team. And when he left, my uncle said, "That's where you're going."
Tell me how you got here to St. Mary's that first time.
I went down to the Windsor train station, and the train pulled up. And then it started moving away, and I thought to myself, "Murphy, what the hell are you doing now?" Anyway, I got on the train. Along the way, I met a group of kids from Cape Breton, and that was an experience all of its own. And then I got to the Nova Scotian Hotel, and Dan Scaling met me downstairs in the train station. And from there, I went to the residence, and of course, 7 o'clock the next morning, on the field for practice. And at the end of the practice, and we're all sweat pouring out of us, and I talked to the guy next to me. And I said, "Anything to do tonight?" He said, "Actually, there's a dance out at Hubbard's." I said, "Well, okay, I'm in." So this guy said, "Well, there's a curfew." And in all seriousness, I responded by saying, "What's a curfew?" I had no idea. Anyway, we went to that. Had a great time, had many other visits, and Daryl and I became best friends. We're still best friends, and we fortunately see each other every couple of years or something.
This team got together 25 years after the championship, 50 years, and now 60 years. Why do you think that is?
The camaraderie we had on the team, the closeness, we still stay in touch with each other. We're interested in how people are doing. We went to see Frankie in the hospital.
Connie, good talking to you. A number of players from that 1964 team went into teaching. Our next player did that, became a phys ed teacher, a coach, and developed some great cross-country runners in his part of the world. J.B. Murphy, John Murphy. John, take me back to 1964 and your memories of that year, that team.
Well, Steve, it's kind of tough. Some of the years get entwined and intermingled. 64, I remember practices, sometimes Hayes would run back punts. We would practice third down punt coverage, and sometimes Hayes would run back punts against us. And he'd kind of laugh if he made it by, that type of thing. I remember our road trips with those guys, and a lot of times coming home, there'd be a lot of singing when the Saints go marching in. That was a good time in those days. And mostly meeting a lot of new guys from all over Canada, not all over Canada, but from Ontario, and the American kids too. And we all had sort of a great sense of humor and a good camaraderie, but there was a little pressure to do your best all the time, and it was appreciated.
What do you remember most about the Atlantic Bowl game itself, the big day at Wanderers Ground in front of 4,000 fans?
Well, the crowd wasn't a factor. It was just us being out there doing our job. And myself anyway, just took it one play at a time. And the most memorable thing is when the final gun went off, it was that we won it. And it was a great challenge. We were there to beat on a good Ontario team, and we met our goals.
What made that team so special?
I think a lot of it has to do with desire to perform well. and a little bit of loyalty to your buddy. The guy beside you, you didn't want to let him down under any circumstances, and to never let up.
When you played, you were a good receiver, but I never particularly saw you as a great runner. Yet one of the things you did after you graduated and moved into teaching high school was cross-country running. How did you get into cross-country running?
I was coaching senior football at the time, and we had some new guys come in to help me coach, and we started off the season, and they just had a different philosophy than I did. I said, well, the cross-country team doesn't have a coach, and you guys got this senior team well underhand, so I'm going to go help the cross-country guys and girls. And I wanted a new challenge, and it was a good change for me.
Did the Hayes coaching philosophy help you in any way as a coach?
There was no joking around. We had our fun as players, and as a coach, I had fun with the kids as well. But we had goals, and we set our goals. Sometimes as a coach, I'd have everyone write down their goals, and I learned a lot from individuals writing down their goals, things I didn't expect. And at the end of the season, I'd have an evaluation. They'd write down what they liked and wanted repeated, and what they didn't like. And I learned a lot from that too. I learned their comments helped me realize maybe I should have changed the odd thing or two to improve.
JB, thanks for this.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Awesome.
In 1964, I think all the players on that team were kind of politicians, but none of us thought for 1 second we'd end up as real politicians, but Mickey Cole did. Mickey was a member of the legislature in Ontario, rising to the cabinet position, and is now the deputy mayor of Canada's largest city, Toronto. Mickey, take me back down memory lane to 64 and what it meant to you.
Well, what it meant to me, Steve, was coming to an amazing Canadian iconic city, Halifax, by the Atlantic Ocean, and coming to a school that was almost like a fraternity, basically, where everybody was very personable, everybody was a character. And it was a place where you had this legendary coach, Bob Hayes. So it was quite a ride.
What made that 64 team special?
Well, we had some very talented people. If you look at the talent on that team, whether it be Paul Puma, the great fullback, you had a quarterback, Dave Murphy, that was so smart and capable, and you had basically linemen that were tough as nails, loved getting their face in the mud, and it was all a lot of grit and desire.
What do you remember about the Atlantic Bowl game itself?
Well, I remember I was worried just before the game because there'd been a huge snowstorm. And the question was whether we were going to be able to play. But luckily the weather cleared up a bit and they plowed off the snow. And so when we got there, I remember it being very slick, slippery. And we had, quite a formidable opponent from down east, McMaster. And, but we held them to 1 point. So that was, and it was such a culmination of such a great year where we beat St. FX, which was an accomplishment itself. We survived UNB, all these other places, and we ended up with this championship.
You spent 18 years as a teacher, teaching history and economics. Then you went into politics. Why politics?
Well, Steve, I had basically taught history, civics. I was always very interested in what was going on in government, what was going on in my city, my country. So I decided to give it a go, and it was never a career plan, but I got into it the level of counselor. Then I eventually did provincial politics. It was almost like an unplanned adventure.
Did St. Mary's prepare you for that?
Well, St. Mary's taught me that you had to be grounded. You had to be sincere and forthright in dealing with people and challenges, that you couldn't do it. You couldn't sweet talk your way out of anything. You had to produce to demonstrate you belong. You couldn't talk your way out of things. You had to get things done. And that's what it taught me, playing football and being in a school with no frills, a very small school, a very unique history, and taught me that kind of Canadian grit.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mike Mickey Cole.
Thank you, Steve.
There were many leaders on the 64 Atlantic Bowl Championship team, but none led as much by example as the player you're about to meet. He was a fullback, and he was a star, and he really hurt people when he ran. And he has given back to St. Mary's in a big way. He, for 17 years, was the driving force behind the St. Mary's Sports Hall of Fame. Let's hear from my teammate, Paul Puma.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's very nice of you to say it saved me from saying it.
Your memories of the 64 team.
Steve, you and I have talked briefly before about memories of the 64 team, and most of my memories are before and after the game. As you well know, we were fortunate enough to be chosen by a selection committee to represent the Atlantic Conference in the Atlantic Bowl game. That St. FX and ourselves had won a home-and-home series. They had beat us in our homecoming, and we were fortunate enough to beat them on their homecoming. And basically, in the point spread, they probably would have finished first in the conference. We were both 6-1 at the end of the year, but the selection committee, in their infinite wisdom, chose us. And we were overjoyed to be selected. This is a real honor for us to represent the conference. The St. Mary's never have been involved in this before. And the team, more than the coaches, took over. That was the most impressive thing to me, is that Bob Hayes and Les Goodwin, who are our two major, I guess, coaches on the team, had to do very little leading up to the Atlantic Bowl. We took it in our own hands. I can remember, just like it was yesterday, that the Dalhousie were good enough to lend us their field to practice on. But it snowed. And who do you think cleared the field? We did. We took shovels out and we cleared the Dalhousie field so we could practice on it. And we did that on more than one occasion. And I don't remember anybody on that team ever complaining about having to do that. And, as far as the game goes, it was kind of a blur. It was a real big deal to be able to play in front of a crowd like that. And my recollection of the game is I think our defense were the number one stars. I mean, they only scored a single point against us in that game. So our defense really held us in there. And Dave Murphy, our quarterback at the time, called a great game. And we had the team I consider to have one of the best backfields around in university football that year. It was Ted Purnell, Darrell Burgess, and myself. And it didn't matter who you gave the ball to. They were we all felt that, we could carry the ball and we could do damage every time we put our hands on the ball.
In that game, the Atlantic Bowl championship game, November, Wanderers grounds, a very muddy field because it had snowed the week of the game. You carried the ball 19 times for 144 yards, probably the best game at the fullback position of your career. Why?
Well, I think the conditions were ideal for me. The field in itself, the condition of the field was in my favor. I think that if I was a speedster, it would have definitely hampered my performance. But that kind of a field, mucking field, was my style of play. And of course, we all say about teammates, but I had a tremendous line in front of me. When you see a hole in front of you, you're going to take it and run with it. And that game, I think that probably every guy on that team played the best game that they ever did in their lives. And it showed in the end, And I want to tell one story, Steve, and I think that I did tell it to you. I'll never forget at halftime, we came into the dressing room at the Wanderers grounds, and Coach Hayes, in his gruff manner as he usually did, started his halftime speech. And all of a sudden, he broke down and left the room. And we all sat there looking at each other. Well, what's going on here? We had never seen Bob Hayes do that, totally out of character, for him. And we just went on back onto the field and finished the job. Simple as that.
You mentioned Coach Hayes, and many have. What impact did Hayes have on your life? What philosophy, if any, did Hayes impart on you that you carried through the rest of your life?
Well, I was brought down here very simply by a person that gave me a phone call after a high school football game. I was at St. Mike's. We had the Brazilian Fathers, and we were playing De La Salle. I had the Christian Brothers. That was a big home-and-home series. And this gentleman called me after the game, and it was that phone call that changed my whole life, because Bob Hayes came to town, and he met with a group of all-stars in Halifax City down at the Royal York Hotel. I wasn't an all-star because St. Mike's was a Catholic school, and at that time, there was no Catholic league. And all we did was play exhibition games. And I didn't have, I wasn't, my future plans were not to go into university because no one in my family had finished high school or gone on to university. So it was because of that phone call and Bob Hayes coming and meeting me, and I guess feeling good about myself. You say the philosophy that he taught me. I think the thing is that instinctive, what it builds in you as a person to overcome adversity. And that helped me not only as a young man, but in my career as a teacher. That, I knew things were not going to be easy, but at the same time, I knew that I had the inner strength that I could overcome that and succeed. And I think that that's the one big thing that Bob Hayes instilled in me that I got from him.
You had a very successful career as a teacher. Did Hayes have any influence on that?
I don't know whether he had any influence on it, but I think he was very proud of the fact that I did teach and that I did, advance in the system and into administration. And I think he probably thought that he was partly responsible for that he had instilled something in me that I would go on and do that. So to answer that question, I don't know if he really instilled anything in me to become a teacher, but he certainly was proud and he was very supportive of myself being an educator.
You were one of the leaders on that team. Throughout your career as a Husky, you were a leader. You're still leading the Huskies now. Where does that leadership quality come from?
Well, that's really, Steve, it's very kind of you to say that because we had a lot of leaders on that team. I don't know. I just feel that I don't know if I like to take charge, but I look around sometimes in a room when there's something that needs to be done, and you look at these blank faces, and you kind of say to yourself, well, someone, has to take charge. Someone has to do it. And as I said to you, that what Hayes instilled in us, that adversity, that you need to accept challenges in life. And I think by accepting challenges in life, you become a better person. By doing it right. In my mind, rather than laying back saying, well, Joe Schmo, he'll do it, but let him do it, But I always liked to take a leadership role, and I felt good about what I did. I was never looking for any praise, and I really wasn't. My satisfaction was knowing that what I did, that I did well, and it was successful. And that's what was a motivating and driving force for me.
One of the players from the 64 team, after getting his degree, joined the Canadian Army and worked in military security in hotspots around the world, especially in the Middle East. After retiring from the Army, he worked as a security advisor in places like Jordan, Egypt, and Israel, to name but a few. Let's meet Captain, who became Major, Tom Haney. Tom, your thoughts on that 64 team?
Thanks, Steve. The 64 team, well, I was a pretty callow 18-year-old young fella. And all of the hoopla surrounding the Atlantic Bowl was really almost too much to take in. Luckily, we had the game against St. Francis Xavier, which finally qualified us for the Atlantic Bowl, which kind of set the stage. But I can honestly say, and now we're all getting up into our late 70s and 80s, that pure joy, the pure adulation and joy that came with the winning of the Atlantic Bowl was really incomparable, Steve. It really was. And I remember Paul Puma got on the telephone, which was, as you know, right outside the locker room, and he was shouting to his grandma in Toronto, saying, no, Grandma, it's like the Rose Bowl, like the Rose Bowl. And I still, to this day, laugh and think about that. And, I went on, as you mentioned, to do a lot of really interesting and some would say exciting things, but I don't think really, looking back, anything really compared to the pure joy of winning the Atlantic Bowl all those 60 years ago.
What do you think is so special about that 64 team that 60 years later we still get together to celebrate that year?
That's a good question. Yesterday we were out watching St. Mary's and Acadia, and each team fielded approximately 80 players and coaches, and there was 28 of us, as I recall, give or take one. And we all knew each other so well. And we could do things without having to explain it. We all knew we were all on the same page. And we worked hard. As you know, Bob Hayes was a taskmaster, character builder, let's say. And but we were all what's the simpatico? We were all on the same page, and everyone felt the joy and the feeling of accomplishment that came with that game.
I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane with some members of the 1964 St. Mary's Huskies Atlantic Bowl championship team. They met 25 years after the win, 50 years, and now 60. Will there be another gathering of that team? I doubt it very much. St. Mary's has a rich tradition of athletics, and certainly in football. There would be many St. Mary's teams that would win Atlantic Bowls, and even national titles. But in 1964, the Huskies of that year were the first ever to win the Atlantic Bowl, and it set a tradition. It set the bar, a very high bar that has been followed year after year ever since. Hope you enjoyed meeting some members of that team from '64.